Welcome back to Excellence in Infrastructure and Environment. This is our ongoing journey to go through the DRMIS system that explains how we manage our data. And in this video, what we are going to do is discuss the DRMIS data model, specifically how it's in the RE effects module. Two things that we're going to cover today. One, for data models, well, if you're not familiar with the term, we'll explain what they are. And then more specifically, we'll discuss the data hierarchy that's in DRMIS that explains the DRMIS data model. A data model is simply something that describes the relationship between the different types of data in a database. So you start by thinking about what you need to track or know, and then eventually you turn that question into a series of database fields, or if you're creating an Excel spreadsheet, those would be the column headers. So you think broadly about what you need to figure out, and then you have very specific names for all the different data elements. While you're doing this, you have to think of an overarching organizing principle, and that'll help you then define what the relationships between all of the different pieces in the database are. Like, how do they relate to one another? What describes what? And you'll see this in the next slide when we talk about how things are in DRMIS. So now we're going to look at the DRMIS data model, and there's a hierarchy to how we store information in DRMIS. And the challenge is, if we look at the graphic on the left-hand side of the screen, you see that there's a lot of information that we need to capture. So this would be a base, and we see on the bottom part of the base, there's some infrastructure, there's different types of buildings. We see on the top part of the base, there's a training area. We also see there's contaminated sites. There's some storage tanks. There's some crash sites. And so there is a lot of information that our data model needs to store, or DRMIS needs to hold on to. So to make sure that this is organized and has a decent relationship, there are several layers or levels to our data. The base layer in our data set is the site. And so what we do is establish a site for every base or large geographic area. Some bases are like this picture, where there's just one contiguous group geographically, but many other bases are non-contiguous, in that will have land spread over an area that in total create the base. So we need a flexible system that will allow us to accommodate both types of bases. So the base layer is a site. On top of the site, we then have a land. So then we can attach a land to the site. That land is either going to be owned by the Department of National Defense, or it can be leased. Now, it's on top of the land is where we will start attaching all of our built assets. So before we can just put a building into our system, we first have to have a site, then a land, then we take a building and assign it to that land area. So our asset level is over here, and these will include all our built assets, including our buildings, our POL tanks, and our works. We can also use this layer to track our UXO, which is our unexploded ordnance, and our contaminated sites. Every so often, we do accidentally contaminate the environment, specifically some piece of land, and so we can track those areas at this layer. Once those assets are in the system, we can further describe them with added detail. At the building level, we can describe them in systems, and we'll explain more about that in a future video. And our works can also be further described and detailed through subworks. An AOID is a unique identifier for an asset. Now, the first 4 digits of an AOID will link to the site where that asset resides. The second set of 4 digits will then refer to that specific asset. And at the initial letter for those 4 digits will then tell you what type of asset you're dealing with. So if it's a B, it'll be a building asset. If it's W, it'll be a works asset. If it's a D, such as Delta, it'll be a divestment asset. Through this system, we can then track our numerous assets, and they are all related to one another through the site or their land value. So that's just a gentle introduction to the data model that we use in DRMIS for our real property assets. In the next video, we'll show you the data model in action as we go through actual screen grabs from DRMIS that shows you how we can use the asset information for actually managing our assets in the workplace.